he has got ahead of him. Let's give him one further round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you I have not yet met, I'm Charles Bowman, and alongside 41 years, I am very old, having worked for professional services for PwC, and also having had the privilege of serving as the 690th Lord Mayor of our great city of London back in 2017-18. I also host a small podcast and vodcast called Off the Agenda, which has given me the privilege of interviewing a number of famous black people, including business leaders, politicians, sports people, actors, and more. And as part of that podcast programme, and I tell you it because I had the honour of interviewing Stephanie back in 2022 and presenting to our Off the Agenda listeners her extraordinary and illustrious career. And I was absolutely thrilled when Stephanie called me to say, would I interview her again this evening on this very special occasion to present to you all the extraordinary career. A career, of course, in law being one of our country's most outstanding and strongest foundation assets. A career that started in private practice before navigating to the Bar Council as a solicitor and developing meteorically thereafter. And amongst other roles that she has or has had, Stephanie is, and this is where I do quote and list, is a Fellow of King's College London, a Commissioner at the National Preparedness Commission, a Trustee at Law Works, a member of the Thomas Reuters Transforming Women Leadership in the Law Advisory Board, and a member of HM Treasury Bayes and City of London Corporation's Socio-Economic Task Force. She is the recipient of 3 honorary doctorates and 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards for her services to the law and to EDI. She is an honorary professor at the Dixon Poon School of Law, King's College London, and has featured on the Powers List's 100 most influential people in the UK in politics, in law and in religion. In 2022, she was the winner of the Inspirational Role Model Award at the Burberry British Diversity Awards. But perhaps most significantly, and the reason why we're here tonight, was when she made history in 2021, becoming, as we've already heard, the 177th President of the Law Society, making her the first black and the first person of colour to be appointed to the role. And tonight, as I said earlier, it is my absolute honour on this special occasion where we unveil her portrait in the hallowed halls of the Law Society where it will hang. It is my greatest pleasure to be able to interview you again. Stephanie. Well, Stephanie, I start by just saying welcome back to the interviewee chair. It's a delight to have you back in it. And I thought we should, again, quickly canter through your life, right from the very beginning, before focusing on the real reason why we're here tonight, of course, the unveiling of the portrait. So in starting, I really want to take you right back to the very beginning. And your mother was born in the island of St Vincent and came to the UK aged 15 in 1967. And your father came to the UK 3 years before from Barbados. You were born in Aylesbury, where your mother raised you as a single parent on a council estate. Can you tell us about those early days and your earliest memories? What was it like as that young child growing up in that community? And what were the challenges and opportunities that you faced at that time?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Charles. And thank you so much to everybody, all the speakers before. It's been quite emotional so far. And Patrick McCann, where are you? It was Aylesbury, not Stevenage.
There we go.
It's the same, Stephanie. Oh. Yes, and my mother's in the back. Mother, give a wave. So, yes.
Yeah. Well done.
But absolutely. So, yeah. I mean, just thinking back, in terms of my grandparents and my parents who came to this country, and you've all heard me speak about this. They came, and what a journey. My grandfather went to Genoa first, and then from the Caribbean, and then crossed over to Southampton, and then up through Victoria to Luton, and then finally to Aylesbury. You followed the work then. And then he would, 2 by 2, send for the children as they were. My mother came with her twin sister who sat at the back with her somewhere. Give a wave, there she goes. But I'd say that they came in search of faith, hope and greater opportunities. They were armed with optimism in pursuit of upward mobility. And through their sacrifices and their endeavours, and so many others, that I can sit where I'm sat here today. But my grandfather spoke about how cold it was in Britain. He didn't dwell on. I never heard my grandfather talk about racism, but he talked about the fact that we were to make something of ourselves, and I always remember that. And that was something that was instilled inside of me from a young age. That actually the sacrifices that my parents had made to come to this country, it was incumbent upon me to do something with my life. And my grandfather is no longer with us, but I think Henry would be proud.
Fantastic. What a lovely answer. Well, referencing weather, in your teens you relocated to the US, where you lived for 6 years before returning to the UK and began your studies in law at that moment in time. How different were your experiences in the US compared to your earlier UK experiences? And perhaps tell the audience a little bit about what your motivations were to study law.
I mean, absolutely. We emigrated to America, and leaving rural Buckinghamshire as it was at that time, I was thrown into the world of the military. I didn't know, the country girl from Aylesbury, not from Stevenage, not knowing terribly much, being thrown into that world. So I had to adapt to. My stepfather was in the Air Force. So I had to adapt to life living on a base. But America marked a turning point in my life, and I'm not sure if I hadn't gone to America. I'm not sure if I would have been sat here. If I'd be sat here today. I think, in terms of Tracy Chapman sang a song, "Across the Lines," and I didn't really appreciate or know what that song meant until I went to America. And she sang about across the lines that separates whites from blacks, and that's exactly the town that we would then live in, Norristown in Pennsylvania, where, because we lived in a certain neighbourhood, we'd be bussed into the white neighbourhood to go to school. And it was just a striking, it didn't mirror the life that I had left here. And I met some incredible people along the way, one who sat in the front seat, who I hadn't seen for 35 years, but has flown over from America to be here today. But just, it marked a turning point in as much that I was struck by the poverty. I've never seen poverty like that. Homelessness, I've just never seen poverty like that. People living on the streets, and you could walk from one block to the next, and it would be a complete different world. I was struck by people being treated differently because of the colour of their skin. I was struck by people's inability to be able to voice their rights or articulate how they felt. And I just wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be the difference.
Fantastic. And the motivation then, therefore, the link between that and law?
I think it's, we grew up in a household, and my cousins here and my brothers are here. We grew up in a household where on the TV, you know, we listened to the news was always playing in the background. And at that time, Nelson Mandela was still incarcerated, and lots was going on in South Africa, lots was going on in this country in terms of sanctions on South Africa and stuff like that. And when I was in America and going to school, on a Thursday, I used to wear, not so dissimilar to now, but just strict black, because I was mourning for the world. And I seemed to get lots of detentions. I think I talked too much, and I was getting detentions all the time. But I would turn up and I'd get out my placard and basically say, you know, if Nelson Mandela is not free, neither are we. And people would say to me, who's Nelson Mandela? You know, and stuff like that. But for me, I think it was what I was seeing unfolding around the world, the way that people were being treated differently. And that really struck something with me. But also, when you look at some of the greats in history, whether they be Mr. Mandela, whether they be Mahatma Gandhi, and so many others, you know, they were lawyers.
Good answer, good answer. Well, you returned to the UK, you gained an LLB from London Guildhall University, and that was back in 1999, the LPC from the College of Law in Guildford, and you were admitted as a solicitor in 2002. Perhaps you could explain a little bit about that journey to professional qualification as a solicitor. What were the challenges you faced and what opportunities presented themselves?
Well, the challenges I faced was that, you know, coming from a low socioeconomic background, I didn't have access to those all-important networks. And that's one of the things I talk about when I talk to aspiring lawyers, is about the importance of networks. So I didn't have that social currency. I didn't have the financial currency. There wasn't anyone that I could ask. I learned by trial and error. But as I say, my journey has been peppered with some of the most amazing people. And I went off to law school and I met some interesting people. I can't see where are you, Mel and Sue? Sarah, who at the back there, my two tutors from law school. Mel I haven't seen since 2000. But, you know, just people who have just supported me, believed in me, and who've encouraged me along the way. And as for opportunities, if you can create them, you know. And I was all about asking questions. I always asked lots of questions, and always just willing to push through that door. I was never one to take something as an end point. I just wanted to keep going. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to use the law as a tool, as an instrument for change. And as I said, you know, despite the fact that I didn't have access to the financials, you know, I didn't even know where I was going to get the money to pay to go to law school. And so I think so much about students today. I had a grant from the local authority. I didn't pay tuition fees, but I remember somebody saying to me when I came out of law school that my debt was bigger than their mortgage. Yeah. And that, you know, so these days, and of course, you know, we talk lots about solicitor apprenticeships, and of course we've got Joe Hughes, who does lots of work around solicitor apprenticeships, along with Patrick McCann. Patrick, that's twice now. But, you know, so really trying to open up the access into the profession and raise awareness around the different routes coming into the profession, because that wasn't there when I was making my way through.
Fantastic. Well, of course you forged a very successful career, and it was only 17 years later that you were elected Deputy Vice President of the Law Society. That was in 2019. The Society is Vice President in 2020, and it's President in March of 2021. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit more about the role and your responsibilities as President? And reflecting back, were there any key moments in your career that helped you to that point?
Gosh, I think we certainly needed a lot of resilience. I mean, it just seemed like every single day there was something. And I'm joined by some colleagues from the Law Society, and Michael Laurent, I can't see you, Michael. Well, he's at the back, there you go. Michael and I were out in India when news broke that the Queen had passed. And, you know, and Yeah, what an extraordinary place to try. I always travel with a black suit. I always wear black. But Mikhail, I don't think you had a black suit, did you? Trying to find a black suit in Delhi. But yeah, so we were out in Delhi when the news broke, and then to come home once the Queen, to the news that the Queen had passed. And one of the most extraordinary things I had to do as president of the Law Society was I then had to write a letter to the King, pledging my allegiance on behalf of the membership in language, extraordinary language. I suspect it was Latin, but in extraordinary language that I didn't even know what half of it meant and was saying. But the weight of that as well, that you were leading the morning, on behalf of the profession. But we had, when Boris Johnson's government fell, one of the things I liked to do in my office was to have the news on in the background, and just the extraordinary events of all the resignations. I mean, as soon as you looked up, there was another resignation from his cabinet, and all the other events that happened around that time. I think, during one of the most tumultuous times in our nation's history, I was at the helm of the Law Society, and those were the external things that were going on, let alone some of the internal around the changes around the way that solicitors train and qualify, Solicitors Indemnity Fund. The Law Society did excellent work. Having been told by the Solicitors Regulation Authority it was never going to happen, they were not going to undo their decision, and we mounted a great campaign. And I remember the day turning up to the meeting with the SRA and not trying to smile too broadly when they backtracked, and of course we still enjoy the Solicitors Indemnity Fund now, but extraordinary times. But day to day it was being at the top. And I remember when I took office, somebody said, it's lonely at the top, and I kind of was like, but some of the extraordinary events that happened during my time in office, the pandemic, the withdrawal in Afghanistan, and of course, the Law Society, along with other organisations, worked with the government in terms of trying to coordinate information to get people out. And I think it's fair to say that some of the things that we were involved in, some of the things we still can't talk about, but I think it's fair to say that some of those things will remain with us for a long time.
Fantastic. And it was a period, a tumultuous period of significant change, as you've identified. You've already highlighted a number of key points throughout it. But if you had to identify one specific personal highlight, a personal high point of those 2 years in posts, what would it be?
Gosh. I mean, there were so many. And it's almost, just from like the start of when I got elected, I hadn't even taken office yet. And I remember actually being called into DLA Piper, and I thought I was there for something else, and didn't realise that I was there for DLA Piper to tell me that they were going to sponsor this film. If you haven't seen it yet, do tune in on YouTube. But I mean, that was one of, and of course Denise Smith made it happen. There were so many things, leading the profession, just the pride in doing that, but also the weight of responsibility in doing that. But I think, and during a pandemic, I remember delivering my inaugural speech from Chancery Lane, and I was one of 3 people, the security guard, an advisor, and me, delivering that speech. But I think, as the country and the pandemic started to wane, in October, because obviously I was supposed to become president in October 2021, but due to unforeseen circumstances, I became president earlier, in March 2021. And I had said from the beginning that I didn't want to do the interview with the BBC correspondents, and I didn't want to do the dinner at the end, round a big table. I wanted to throw the doors open of Chancery Lane and invite people in, but of course the pandemic put a stop to that. So I was left in October 2021 when we could finally have a few people around us. So it was my inauguration where I invited the still pans into Chancery Lane, a bit of reggae pumping out there, and the whiff of Caribbean food. So, but in fairness, my inauguration was just a mix of just different. I mean, it was diversity at its best. We had so many. We had poetry, we had prayers, we had everything in there. And everybody who gave of their time freely and willingly, just to be part of that.
Fantastic. And throughout the course of that, before and indeed after, you promoted the importance of UK rule of law, explaining that it is, as I said earlier, one of our country's strongest assets and competitive advantages that we have on the world stage at this time. But you've also cited that over the decades, and noted the underfunding and what the cuts have meant in terms of lack of judges and so on and so forth. How important is that investment in our rule of law, and what needs to be done?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the UK's adherence to the rule of law is why people come and live here, why they come and invest here. They choose to raise their families here, and so forth. And that's a strong pillar of our democracy. And we've seen an erosion of that. And we've seen, and we've seen examples globally where the rule of law has collapsed. And of course, America's a point and example. A couple of years back, and of course we sit on tender hooks as we await what might happen. The outcome of the election in America. Because let's face it, if America sneezes, Britain catches a cold. So that's the difficulty. But what we need is, and I've spoken long about, we had the budget yesterday, and there has been some money in terms of the justice system, but of course that's around prisons, and that is well needed. It's around prisons, it's around the probation service, the CPS, but we can't piecemeal the justice system. It's got to be sustained investment across the whole of the justice system. And one of the examples I give is that the rule of law in its simplest form is that no one is above the law. But if we don't invest in the justice system, the rule of law, imagine calling 999 and there's no one there to answer your call. So it's all of those things. And one of the reasons why I talk lots about the law and trying to raise the public's awareness and knowledge about the law, because for me, legal rights mean absolutely nothing if you don't know what those rights are, and you don't even know when your rights are being taken away. And so that's the importance of the rule of law, means that we can sit here, we can walk the streets most of the time without fear. But we can live in our homes, we don't bear arms in this country. All of those things that we at times take for granted.
True. And you've often noted that the sort of put it all into the context of the shortage of judges and public prosecutors and the physical human resource that sits within it. How can positions and career paths become more attractive and open to young people who may not have access to the law, but who might have the skill sets and interest in pursuing that interest in law?
I still hear lots of students who are saying that they don't know where to get the information. I would like some sort of central hub that all this information, whether it's internships, work experience, all the different groups, you've heard me talk lots about collaboration, where it can all be fed into that, and that information can be put out where students can tap into that hub and they can extract where they can get work experience from. And I know there are great organisations out there that do, and is doing lots. But there are still lots of students who, if they are not in the know, and I was at a tech company yesterday speaking, and that's exactly the questions that I was being asked, was around, I don't know where to get the information from. And that goes back to that social currency in terms of those networks, so it's getting that information out there and broader. And one of the things I've always said about lots of the law firms in central London is that do lots in our back garden. But there are so many, the United Kingdom is a huge place. And just to spread our tentacles a bit further and just try and reach a bit more students and open up. And that's one of the reasons why I have continued to do what I do, is to, as I say, raise awareness around the different entry routes into the legal profession. And I know there are so many colleagues in this room who are doing exactly that and more. But a central hub would be good, that we could just put it out there. And maybe that's something the Law Society could coordinate. I can't see Richard or Ian, but out there at the back there. But something that people can go to, and they're given that information when they're either coming in, or they go to law school, Mel, Sarah, yeah, law school, and they're given that information and they can just tap in and tap out.
Fantastic. Well, nice segue. It's a little while since you handed on the reins of responsibility at the present, but you remain remarkably busy. And what I find very and particularly admirable is that you do so not through seeking trophy roles and titles, but getting on and walking the talk. And this includes your support for next generation leaders, support for disabled and others. And tonight is a good example of it. I know that we're joined by students from Kent University who are winners of the university mooting competition, and you've not only paid for their admission, but that of course is not all. You do much more. Can you provide our audience tonight with a little snapshot, an overview of the myriad activities you continue to engage with beyond the post and present of the Royal Society, and what motivates you essentially today, and what will continue to motivate you tomorrow?
Gosh, well, yes, it's been just over 2 years since I handed the reins over. Jeffrey Voss told me I'm not allowed to say step down. Where are you, Jeffrey? I can't see you. But certainly my family said to me that, you know, when my tenure came to an end, that they thought they'd see more of me, but I'm not quite sure that is true. But I think, you know, it's that passion that drives me in terms of just wanting to make the difference. So I remember not being in the room, and of course you've heard me and others talk about being president would enable me to walk through doors that I didn't even know were there, invited into rooms that I would never have been invited into, and I'm still being invited into those rooms. And you know, in terms of the two students who joined us this evening, you know, when I was up and coming, the idea that I could be in a room of thought leaders and business people and, you know, I'm a former president, not a past president, but you know, and all of that, senior partners and you know, chancellors of universities and so forth, I would have absolutely, you know, that would have been amazing, but far too often that is not the case. And so I do lots in terms of my local secondary school. I go back and I talk to them, I try and take people with me to go back. Aylesbury is thought of as Leafy Buckinghamshire, but it's a social mobility cold spot, as is lots of parts of Buckinghamshire, but also other parts of the United Kingdom. So I don't know if James Stewart is in here, if James made it, no? Oh, James, you're at the back. So James does lots of things with schools, with All Rise, in terms of just taking the law into schools. And James is looking for sponsorship, so if anybody, you know, please speak to James. But trying to take the law into schools and make it accessible, because that's one of the things I've said in terms of increasing access to our profession, is that lots of people exclude themselves because they think it's not for me, you know, I'll never make it, and that's one of the barriers that we want to break down in respect of that accessibility, and show people that you can do it, you can be part of this profession. And I also have a thing about, you know, people we put in positions of power and influence. But I won't go into that because that's more about the political system and the leaders that we elect. But anyway, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let us bring us on to the real reason why we're here tonight, and that is, of course, to witness the unveiling of your portrait, painted by Marina Tranny, a scientist who gave up her line of work, that was in science, to focus on a love for painting. And perhaps you might explain to the audience here tonight how you came to choose Marina to paint your portrait. What was the actual process of the portrait painting? And perhaps explain a little bit about the emotions that you experienced throughout that process.
Well, absolutely, Marina, and you'll hear from Marina shortly, but I think it was the universe that drew us together. With a little sprinkling of Dr. Heather Melville. So Marina did a portrait of Dr. Melville, and Heather shared the portrait with myself and Jamie Frampton, OBEDL. and I was struck by it. And I asked Heather for the details. And then Heather introduced me to Marina, and we had a call, and gosh, I thought you were going to tell me. I thought you were going to tell me years. I thought you were going to tell me, tens of thousands of pounds, and what else? And then you said, Marina said, because I think we spoke in August or something like that, and you said, "Oh, Stephanie, well, I'm not going to do your Italian accent. You do it so well." but you said it would take 3 to 4, and I was on the edge of my seat, and I thought, here we go, 3 to 4 years. And you said 3 to 4 weeks, and I said 3 to 4 weeks. And you said, but you had something else on. So could I do it in October? And of course I went, "Ching, October." I thought, Black History Month. But we just got on, didn't we? Marina got it, absolutely got it, and we just gelled, and we worked together to produce this, and Marina has done an amazing job. It's quite emotional having your portrait done,
Yeah. And yes, well done,
Yeah.
Marina.